What's up, shark nerds? I'm Paul Clerkin, a shark researcher, and today we are going to continue our discussion on megamouth sharks. So if you haven't seen the first video, just go back and watch that one. That's about what we know about megamouth sharks, because today we're talking about researching megamouth sharks. Let's dive in. So in our last video, we talked about megamouths, what we know about them, which is very little. They weren't discovered until 1976, and since then we've only seen a few specimens in the wild, and very rarely are they alive. So how do we study a shark that is almost impossible to find, and what kind of information do we need? So back a couple of years ago, I think 2014, I was talking to one of my friends in Taiwan, and he just kind of mentioned that they've been seeing megamouth sharks show up in the fish markets. They have these large fish markets, and they lay out all their catch, and they were seeing megamouths. They didn't know who was catching them. They just would show up and people would buy them and eat them, but they didn't know where they were coming from. So I was so excited to have the opportunity to potentially study these species. I hopped on a plane and flew over to Taiwan with kind of very little idea of what I was going to do. Once I got there, we just started asking around the fish markets and seeing if anybody knew who was catching these sharks. And we came across a captain who said he was catching megamouths fairly consistently as bycatch. He was catching them by accident. And even though the meat was very low quality, it was not expensive. They were so large that he was getting a large price per shark because he was selling it by the pound. So we asked him if we could go out and watch him fish, and if we caught a megamouth as bycatch, if he would let us tag it and release it, and he said yes. So we hopped on the boat, and we didn't have a good idea of what was going to happen or how they were going to fish. Once we got to sea, we found out that the boat kind of steamed forward, and they would just drag a net behind them. They just let it get pulled out, and it would sink down and create a wall of mesh, and they would catch anything that swam into this wall. They would set the net around sunset, and they would pick it up right before sunrise. So for most of the time, we were just waiting at sea, just floating around trying to sleep on a boat. So we're all bobbing around on this boat, looking over the edge, and the nets are slowly coming up. They're just coming up over this wheel and going to the back of the boat where they're getting stacked up. But pretty much everyone just staring in the water for hours as these nets are slowly coming up. And eventually there's a huge commotion. People are yelling and shouting, and we have a gigantic megamouth shark. I was very excited. I didn't even really think about what I would have to do, that I would be jumping into the water at night on a commercial boat offshore from Taiwan. So I just geared up. I put on my wetsuit, put on a harness so I could get pulled out of the water in case of an emergency, and I jumped in. It was really dark, and as soon as the bubbles cleared out of my mask, I looked up, and there was this huge deep sea megamouth shark staring back at me. This was a really special moment because I got to make eye contact with this deep sea shark, which nobody gets to see alive. And also that deep sea shark was seeing me, a human, which it never sees. So I almost felt like we're ambassadors from two different worlds, and it was kind of a cool moment. And then I had to snap into gear and get to work. So the first thing we did was we put the tag in, because we really wanted to tag the shark and find out where it goes. So how do we put the tag on the shark? There's a lot of different kinds of tags and a lot of different ways to attach the tags, but I wanted a long-term satellite tag, and this thing is practically a little computer that's going to take a lot of information from the shark, so it really has to stay on the shark for a long time. And to do that, I have a little dermal anchor attached to the tag. It's like a little piece of metal that I put right into the basal cartilage of the first dorsal fin. So they have their dorsal fin on their back, that big fin, and that is anchored in with all this thick cartilage. And so this little tag, it gets anchored right into the cartilage of their fin, and it rides around on their back. After a certain amount of time, it pops off and floats to the surface, and it will transmit data to a satellite in space, and that will get sent to my laptop, and I can see what the shark has been doing for up to a year. And that was pretty straightforward. She wasn't moving a whole lot. She was kind of just hanging out at the surface. So we put that in, and then we started taking data. We took length data, we took fin length, we took dorsal fin measurements, we took basic biological stuff like sex, length, maturity, and we started collecting parasites. She had parasites, these little copepods around her mouth and gills, and we just took as many of those as we could off of her. I'm sure she appreciated it, but also we wanted to study those parasites. She was so big, there were little fish that were just hanging around off of her like she was a little island or something like that. And then after we took all this data, we were ready to release her, and she swam off. And I kept swimming with her, and she just stayed at the surface. I actually swam with her for way longer than I should have. I just kept swimming with her, and I went up to the surface and I looked back, and the boat was way too far away for being in the middle of the ocean in the middle of the night. And then I had the thought of, this megamouth is right here at the surface, and nobody knows it's here. And then I was thinking about, like, what else do I not know is here? So I kicked back to the boat as quick as I could. But we're all super happy because this was the first time that anybody had successfully put a pop-off satellite tag on a megamouth. I did this in 2018, and I programmed the tags to stay on the shark for 18 months. So they actually have popped off and transmitted the data. And while I have not decoded and mapped where these sharks have gone yet, I have all the data now, and I hope to analyze it and share those results soon. All right, shark nerds, so that is my Megamouth project, which is one of my favorite ongoing projects. I hope to be able to share the data soon, so keep tuning in if you want to learn more about megamouths or other species of sharks. Like, share, subscribe, all that stuff, and visit me again because we're trying to make Shark Week every week.